Welcome to the Corporate Learning Network videocast. I'm Jeff Cattell. Today I have with me Dan Locke, author of the just released free ebook, The Fundamentals of Change Management. Dan is also a regular contributor to our website. Dan, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Jeff.
So I want to begin by asking you, what was your impetus to put together this type of ebook on change management?
It's really interesting. I have, in the last couple of years, have been doing an increasing amount of exclusively change management projects where I've been asked to help purely with change management as opposed to, say, project management, technology implementations, or process improvement, which is my other specialty, where I might re-engineer processes. And what I realized was that it's there's more awareness around the need and requirement for change management, but it's still poorly understood by business leaders and by technical leaders. And so I wanted to put together and lay down my thoughts on the fundamentals of change management, the principles that underpin it, and how people can, if they understand it and apply them, can better realise the benefits of their projects.
Yeah, definitely. I want to delve a little bit deeper into that. You sort of hit on a point that I specifically want to go off on in terms of people not necessarily knowing generally about change management, but not knowing necessarily deeper than something, very surface level, that maybe they think it's about changes in technology or structure or business processes or strategy. But you say that this change management is all really rooted in behavior. And learning and development, obviously our focus, is really well positioned to change the behavior of employees through programs and different learning portals and things of that nature. So do you think L&D professionals see themselves right now as these change managers?
I think increasingly they will. Perhaps not at the moment. They're probably focused on their training, and I think though they should be integrated more into the change management. And the reason is this: training is not an event, it's a process. And when you build training into the broader change management process, I think that's how L&D professionals are able to contribute to the behaviour change that's required.
Okay. And are there any parts of the business that you can think of that are particularly good at change management? Is anybody, taking this on as really their strong point and something that they're going to be known for? Or is it still kind of this nebulous topic that is kind of unclear about who has ownership over it?
Absolutely unclear in organisations currently. I find some organisations change management can sit under HR. In other organisations, it might sit in corporate communications. In other organisations, still it sits in IT. It's really interesting. It doesn't have an honest home like any of those other silos. And that is probably a blessing and a curse. It's good in that every organisation is different, and so it needs to sit where it makes sense, given the objectives that they're trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. On the flip side, it's negative because people don't really understand it, don't really know what to do, and it can often have become misaligned in an organisation, and therefore the organisation is not getting the full benefit that change management and a structured change management program or and strategy in their organisation can help them deliver. So it's important that organisations think through what they're trying to do and understand the degree of behaviour change that's required for any project or strategy or any technology implementation. Because almost always there's a large component, if not mostly, behaviour change is required.
Okay, that makes sense. So another thing that you mentioned in your book, and especially sort of key into at the beginning, is the idea that oftentimes change management necessitates a bit of a change in company or employee culture. And that made me really think about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we were at Corporate Learning Week, our big event, and we had a CLO panel, Chief Learning Officers, all together. And that's exclusively what they were talking about. They spent a whole hour talking about company culture and learning and development's role in company culture. So it's definitely, I think, a hot topic these days, company culture. But can you talk about the connections between change management and company culture?
Absolutely. Here's the thing. If change management is about behaviour change, first of all, Culture, well, let's first define what culture is. In my definition, culture change is that set of beliefs that govern behaviour. And so if we're looking at change management is looking to affect behaviour directly as well. And so change management has a place in culture change. So if an organisation is going through a large culture change, they're looking to change their way they behave so that they have some outcome, some tangible. Culture change in and of itself is not an end in and of itself. It's a means to an end. Mm-hmm. And so if an organisation wants to, say, become more entrepreneurial and have an entrepreneurial culture or more of an innovation culture, well, they need to that should start showing up somewhere in people's behaviour, and it should start showing up in the results. So if we're talking about innovation, they should start producing new products and selling new products. Perhaps they didn't sell last year or the year before, for example. Change management is the same, uses the same concept, and you would use the same tools and concepts to go from a staid organisation to an innovative, a business that has an innovative culture. And you would use the same tools and techniques, just at probably a higher level, because it's more of a strategic initiative.
All right, yeah. Another sort of key point that I wanted to hone in on for our viewers and also get some more insight from you is this idea of empowerment with employees and how that sort of plays into change management. It sounds like its impact can really be significant. So can you explain that for our viewers?
Yeah, absolutely. So once again, just talking about definitions, I think that's important. My definition of empowerment is that employees have the ability to decide the outcomes of their own work. And so when you think about it from that point of view, it allows them to make decisions that can, on the spot, that can get their job done within a reasonable balance. And management should always be looking to, if we imagine that decision power that they have, autonomy, is a square, they should be trying to push out those boundaries constantly, management. And that's the job of management. And to do that, you need to train people in judgment and decision making and risk management and so on. And empowerment, though, is really probably the goal of change management in the end. So let's say we're implementing a new technology. You want people to reach a stage of empowerment where they now are owning this system. They are now prepared to use it. They're coming up with ideas on how they can extend it, and they're using it to its full capability to deliver the results for their customers. And that's when you've reached the stage of empowerment. And that's really what I think change managers and the change management process is all about, is getting to the stage of empowerment. Involved in that, training, learning and development are all parts and components of that. But change management as a whole looks and takes an integrative approach to those tools and individual processes to get to that objective.
Yeah, it seems like definitely a good goal and a worthy way of sort of assessing if this is actually happening. All right, before I let you go, one thing I sort of wanted, closing things up, looking sort of from a global approach of your book, I noticed a lot of different kind of inroads that you use to start talking about change management. Some of it's academics. You mentioned Maslow's hierarchy and EFRAG Goldratt, and examples from big businesses that people are familiar with, like JCPenney and IBM, and then also your own personal experiences in the business world. So can you talk about your decision to focus on all of these different angles and how change management has affected, or how that can affect all different angles of a person's sort of career and business life?
Sure. So in part, I like to use lots of examples in my writing to bring the writing alive, make it less academic. Sometimes you can use sort of academic examples, like you said, the one about EFRAG, or even Maslow's, everybody knows about that. But I used other ones in there, a simple one about to illustrate peer pressure, where there was a study done where people had 3 lines, 2 of which are the same size, one of which is clearly smaller, but they had a team, a group of actors, which said, oh no, that smaller one's the same size as these other 2. And the one person who didn't know that the others were actors acquiesced and said, oh, I must be wrong. They didn't trust their own judgment. And so I use that in the book as an illustration for why how peer pressure can work, but it's not the most effective way to change, because as soon as that person finds out that they've been tricked or duped or pressured, the behaviour change that they were looking for is gone. and so it doesn't stick. Whereas you want to use rational self-interest, and I'll talk about that. And so I want to use examples that bring it alive that people can relate to, underpinned by academic theory, and also examples they see in the modern business, contemporary environment. And so when I talk about J.C. Penney, and then comparing and contrasting that to say what happened at IBM in the early 90s, everybody knows about these stories, and also how Jack Welch approached his change and culture change efforts. And so people can then it helps these otherwise academic ideas stick in people's head. And also I like to use a few from just my own personal experience when I go to the gym and things like that. One of the things I talk about in the book is it's important in change management to force people to let go. So you get all the way to the end, but at some stage you've got to turn off the spreadsheet. You've got to turn off the old system, and you've got to, force people to take on the new change and to embrace it by withdrawing. And I use the example where I was doing CrossFit, and some of your readers, especially in the US, would know about CrossFit, and they have Olympic weightlifting. And one of the things I realised is that to really excel at weightlifting, you can't hold onto the bar, because when you get that bar above your head, you're afraid that you grip onto it because you don't want it to fall on your head. But actually, you've actually got to let go of the bar in an effect and catch it, and then you push it up above your head. And it's that metaphor is that sometimes you've got to let go to be able to get to that next stage of what you're trying to achieve. And so I think when people can have a variety of illustrations in people who write, it springs to life and makes it more memorable. And so that's really what I'm trying to do there. But also I use that same technique in my speeches, but also when I'm working with clients one-on-one. I want to really hammer home those points with something that they can hold on to, and then that will help them adjust their behaviour.
All right, well, thanks, Dan. That was Dan Lok, author of the just published ebook, The Fundamentals of Change Management. You can download your own copy of the book on Dan's website, daniellok.com. Thanks for watching.